What you see is what you get. Just a guy that loves adventure.
Grab a seat, double check your inventory, and make sure you have all your power-ups. This is Heart Talks Games on Pilaf Entertainment.
This is only the beginning.
Pilaf.
Now, because tonight is such a special show, we do have one more thing. One of our industry's most celebrated developers has been hard at work in complete secrecy, building a brand new original world unlike anything they've done before. And we're happy to share with you tonight's final world premiere at the 10th anniversary of the Game Awards.
A bit of a
Preface.
I know that this is a crazy scenario and it would take a lot for it to happen. This video is just for fun, and no, it is not based on any leaks, nor has Sega announced this in any way, nor do I have any insider information. This is all hypothetical, speculation, and most importantly, for fun.
Let's get ready to rumble! It's round one, and Sega is flexing its newfound muscles with its brand new game system called Dreamcast.
This is the first time I ever played it.
First time for Matt Mignogno,
Whoa.
because this is the first day it went on sale.
I expect it to do really well.
Sales that are expected to bring in $45 million, and that's just today. Dreamcast will bring in more in one day than even the hit movie Star Wars: The Phantom Menace made on its opening day.
So many things have changed in 23 years, especially in the gaming landscape. For over half of the time the home console gaming market has been a mainstay, post the video game crash of 1983, Sega has not been in our homes as a console, but rather a developer. It's almost sad to see because so many know Sega as a main competitor to the titan of Nintendo in the late 80s and 90s. However, after some poor decisions all around, their final system was the Dreamcast, and it was discontinued in March of 2001. However, as we said before, so much has changed in this 20 plus years. Multiple consoles can say that they've sold 100 million units. A system stole the hearts of everyone with motion controls. The stories told are now some of the greatest in the modern entertainment sphere. And they look more realistic than ever. Plus, they're more mainstream now than ever. The last time Sega was in this battle, 3D graphics were just becoming the norm, couch co-op was how you played with your friends, and online gaming was in its infancy. Games like Smash Bros. And Mario Party were in their first releases, dual analog gaming was just introduced with the DualShock, and the Microsoft Xbox wasn't even released yet. But, with all that said, hello all my humans out there on the interweb, my name is Hart, and I truly think that this is the perfect time. So, this is how Sega could return to the console market. So this has been something on my mind for a while, but it really started to make more and more sense, in my opinion, over the last few years. And I've seen many great creators do short videos on if it makes sense, and even give some suggestions on how to bring it back. But I want to lay out an in-depth, most mostly realistic plan on what I think would need to happen, not only for a return, but a booming return. This concept is something I feel where if you're going to do it, all the stops would have to be pulled out and nothing would have to be left to chance. From first reveal to first year plans, and that's actually what we're going to be covering. We are going to start at the initial announcement, onto the full reveal, the lead up to launch day, and the day itself. Then to the first full fiscal year. But first, we have to see how we got to this point, and obviously look at where we left off.
Genesis does.
16-bit arcade graphics,
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does.
16-bit sports action.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis does.
Get Joe Montana free, Pat Riley free, Buster Douglas free, Super Monaco GP free, or Collins free. What Nintendo?
Service Entertainment Games, aka Sega, entered the console market in 1982, with its first release in Japan being the SG-1000. However, due to oversaturation in the console market, it didn't see much success, and there was another family computer that released on the same day. Japan, in 1985, then saw the release of the Sega Mark III, later renamed the Sega Master System. This is when North America and Europe would see their first Sega home systems in 1986 and 87. But, once again, due to the Famicom, Nintendo Entertainment System in North America, it did not see major success, but was commercially successful in Europe. Then, the mainstream competitor that needs no introduction, the Sega Mega Drive, aka Sega Genesis, released in 1988 for Japan, 89 for North America, and 90 for Europe. While the Super Famicom, or Super Nintendo Entertainment System, did outsell it overall, it was in a neck-and-neck race in North America, with the Genesis selling somewhere between 18 and 20 million units, and the SNES selling around 23 million. This is what truly made Sega a household name, and it seemed like for at least the next generation or two, it was going to be Sega and Nintendo going back and forth. However, now we come to one of the biggest out-of-spite moments and betrayals in not just video game history, but business history.
I'm going to ask Sony Computer Entertainment President of America, Steve Reyes, to join me for a brief presentation.
The Nintendo PlayStation was a planned CD add-on for the SNES. Things seemed to be going well, and June 1st of 1991, Sony announced that they would be making this collaboration with Nintendo. However, after 4 years of development and at the true last minute, Nintendo announced that they would be making the add-on with Sony's then rival, Philips, at a complete surprise to them. Now, this is where people leave out a bit of the story. In a last-ditch effort, Sony tried to stick it to Nintendo by taking the idea to Sega, Nintendo's then rival. Sega of America actually agreed to make a joint console, however, the heads of Sega of Japan rejected it, saying that's a stupid idea. Sony doesn't know how to make hardware, and they don't know how to make software either. Why on earth would we do this? Back to the systems for a sec, Sega would then go on to release the Sega Saturn in 1994 for Japan and 1995 for North America and Europe. And the initial sales in Japan were good, selling 500,000 units in the first month. And for the West, a $50 million ad campaign was shown, pushing for an older crowd. But because the Sony PlayStation was outselling the Saturn in Japan, the then president of Sega, Hayao Nakayama, ordered Sega of America's president, Tom Kalinske, to release the Saturn 4 months ahead of schedule. At the end of the E3 presentation, Sega announced that the Saturn was out right now at an astronomical price of $399 USD. And then the rest was history. Sony's then president Steve Reyes got up on stage and delivered the iconic line,
$299.
The Sony PlayStation was $100 cheaper and had better launch titles in quantity and variety. While the Saturn sold 80,000 in its first 4 months, the PlayStation sold 100,000 in its first 2 days. The PlayStation would then go on to sell 100 million units worldwide and over 1 billion units of software. Sega then of course took one more shot at the home console market with the Sega Dreamcast, their 5th and final major release hitting store shelves in 1998 for Japan and 1999 for North America and Europe with the iconic 9999 release. It actually ended up being the budget console of the generation, being 29,000 yen, 200 pounds or 199 USD, having groundbreaking features like a built-in modem that helped you make the system into a home computer. Innovative games like Jet Set Radio, Phantasy Star Online, Shenmue, and of course featuring Sonic's first his first real 3D entry with Sonic Adventure. But due to past failures of the Saturn, 32X, and even the Sega CD, the company's reputation just wasn't the same. Not to mention the lack of third-party support and the console being more difficult to develop for. Sony would then of course release the PlayStation 2. In addition to having all the things that the Dreamcast didn't, it released with a DVD player built in. Sega posted a 51.7 billion yen loss, being around 417 million USD or 331 million loss in pounds, officially discontinuing the console in March of 2001, with the last first-party release being Puyo Puyo Fever in Japan on February 24th, 2004. Now, this may all sound a little doom and gloom, but I think all of this history would really need to be looked over in a real-life scenario. Take a month or two just seeing what worked and what didn't in every region with every console. Learn from those mistakes and then tackle a new system. Now, lastly, before we get into the system and talk about everything around it, we have to talk about the things that are actually out of Sega's control. As I said, I at least want to keep this semi-realistic, and there are a couple of things, in my opinion, that would have to happen for a new console to have a real shot. As we said before, by the time Sega was out of the console market, Microsoft hadn't even released its first console, the original Xbox. They would be the only company to truly give Sony a run for their money because after the GameCube, Nintendo clearly stopped trying to keep up with the industry and just make what worked for them. The PS3 and Xbox 360 war was the only time that a gaming rivalry was truly mainstream post-Sega and Nintendo from the early 90s. And despite having a successful generation selling over 85 million units, they would go on to lose the generation that so many say wasn't the one to lose. The Xbox One went on to sell around 58 million units, while arguably PlayStation's greatest overall console, the PS4, went on to sell 117 million units and counting. The Xbox Series X then released on November 10th, 2020 worldwide, and while still selling over 20 million units since its release, the PS5 has sold over 65 million units. And with the recent controversial "This is an Xbox" ad campaign, basically saying that anything can be an Xbox, this has fans in an uproar, mainly saying why even buy an Xbox in the first place. Unfortunately, this has put Microsoft in a position to basically put all of the Xbox exclusives on other platforms, with the president all but confirming this will happen.
The CEO of Microsoft did a very long interview last night talking about investors and exclusives, and he basically said that Xbox is broke, that they are just completely out of cash, and this new initiative of Xbox Anywhere, the whole idea is putting Xbox games onto Nintendo Switch, onto PlayStation 5, just anywhere that can actually make their money back.
Yes, this is very disappointing for Xbox fans and gamers as a whole. For basically the second half of the home console revival, Xbox has been a household name, and it's sad to see things turn out this way. However, this would be the perfect setup for Sega, and really would be needed in my opinion. There cannot be 4 current console manufacturers truly competing. Now, in a world where Sega had just as many truly iconic IPs as Nintendo, we might be having a different convo. But that's not really the case. Sega, in addition to those fans who are diehards, are going to need to take those in-between fans and or the true casual gamer. These are the fans who still just buy the latest console to play Call of Duty or any other online games with their friends. And in addition to that, if there's a sale or two, they might get a console exclusive or an older title. Those fans would need to be converted to Sega. This is also where spite is still just as strong as ever. There are Xbox fans who really don't want to buy a PlayStation no matter what, and they will support a Sega console just to make sure Sony doesn't get any money. And this is the second thing, but honestly, this really is just business. I'm never for making things more expensive for humans, but in this case, you're almost wanting Nintendo and Sony to get cocky. Because of some of the marketing and prices we're going to get into later, most games would have to get to the point where $69.99 is the norm. Nintendo games would still have to be full price no matter how old they are. Now, I don't really want or think it's a must happen, but I think it would be a huge advantage for Sega. Now, with all that out of the way, let's go into what we're covering one more time. We're going to start at the initial announcement, onto the full reveal, the lead up to launch day, the day itself, and then the first full fiscal year. In this, we're going to talk about the general marketing and aesthetic, hardware, and software. So, let's fast forward to the 12th Game Awards in 2026.
Long-term game. I'm not going to sit here and say you need to release another console because that would be just ridiculous. You don't need to release another console. I know that there are petitions, the Sega Spartan, all out there. You don't need to do that. There's no point.
Unfortunately, as of now, the chances of Sega making a new console are virtually non-existent.
Okay, I saw this giddy post on Reddit about some article, and I read through it, and the Reddit post was right to be giddy, because Sega is grinding their quills to make a comeback, and they are doing it right. Interview with such a cold bar by saying that his message to Sega fans is simply that Sega is coming back, and all that makes my kidneys tingle.
The 12th Game Awards have come and almost gone. As we get to the end of the night, the biggest announcement is always saved right before the game of the year. And like routine, Jeff Keighley says, we have one more thing. The theater goes dark with an abstract space atmosphere. The text simply reads, prepare to enter the cosmos. 2/20/27. A blurred out silhouette shows a little bit of the actual console, and after a few seconds of darkness, Sega of America's president Suji Itsumi would come out with the theater still dark and just a light with a blue hue on him, simply saying, we thank you for 25 years of love. We humbly ask, can we join the game? Prepare to enter the cosmos. Sega is back. Jeff Keighley then confirms that after 25 years, Sega is re-entering the console market with Project Cosmos. The full reveal will be on 2/20/27. This, of course, sends the crowds, streamers, and fans at home into a frenzy. Now, the reason I go with the Game Awards is actually because it's the biggest current platform to announce almost anything gaming related. Streamers had one of, if not their biggest stream this past year, and the show itself had over 65 million viewers. And with the unfortunate death of E3, this is now the platform to go to for generational announcements. I truly think that this is a setup for the biggest announcement in Game Awards history. The 25 years comes from the discontinuation of the Dreamcast, and in the Earth year 2026, it will have been 25 years since it was taken off store shelves. Even the date 2/20/27 is for marketing. Other than once again calling back to the Dreamcast with a catchy date like 9/9/99, this is also a day where an Earth lunar eclipse is supposed to happen, in relation to the Cosmos name. And honestly, I think this is just where you let the internet be itself. Almost go silent about things until January 1st, 2027. Humans are going to talk, speculate, make videos. Essentially, just let the hype be and keep everyone on their toes by staying silent. On New Year's, just release another trailer confirming the day and maybe showing a little more of the console. I know that this would need a massive ad campaign like the Saturn, and it would get one, but in my opinion, that's for after the full reveal. Now, once February 1st rolls around, this is where you share things like teaser images and maybe even cryptic tweets / posts talking about the console. Finally, drop day. I feel that this should be released at 11 p.m. on Coordinated Universal Time. Yes, I took the time to think about this. This is the time when most of the people on Earth could be and or are awake. With it being afternoon / early evening in America's major cities like Los Angeles and New York being 3 p.m. and 6 p.m., in Tokyo it would be 8 a.m., and in somewhere like London it would also be 11 p.m. because it shares the same time. But this drop would be on a Saturday, so I feel that everyone who at least wants to see it would at some point in the weekend catch up with it. It's almost like this is perfect and they should do it. Anyway, the full trailer should be around 2.5 minutes, showing off the basics of the console's hardware and software, setting the tone for it, almost being an abstract space aesthetic with a bold undertone. Then also show love to the consoles in the past, maybe transitioning from logo to logo, letting the viewer know that this is also home for those systems. Finally revealing the name, Sega Cosmos, and the console would be set to release holiday 2027. Now, I like the name more than Andromeda, mainly for marketing's sake. Cosmos is just overall easier to digest as a name, and in my opinion, so much can be done with it. Now, like others have said, I actually don't agree with Genesis 2 or Dreamcast 2. This is because I feel like it needs to be its own thing. The fact that it carries the name Sega is enough for nostalgia's sake. The fact that it's a Sega console is enough. Cosmos, I feel, gives enough personality, but also is a good callback to other systems, even in a way of saying, yes, they were all great, but now they're literally all in the Cosmos. Now, this is also where I'm going to use the first everything else getting expensive point. The Cosmos is going to go back to its Sega roots and be the most affordable console of the generation, being 48,000 yen, 299 pounds, and or 299 USD. And this would release with a base black and white version. I don't want to talk about hardware too much because that's a whole section for later, but these are the basics. Now in comes the ad campaign. For example, the fourth Sonic movie has already been confirmed and it's releasing at some point in spring 2027. This console would go right along with it. YouTube ads on anything and everything gaming related. Sega's presidents and developers doing plenty of interviews, various collabs and celebrity commercials, convention appearances, letting creators play the console for a very short time, even music from games past being released, and even making a Cosmos soundtrack. And drop after drop after drop. Accessories, hardware details, and plenty of games. Speaking of that, I actually had so much I wanted to cover when it came to software, so that's what we're going to be covering first.
I feel.
I understand. When you're ready, tell me.
I will.
Now we move into the fun part, various game releases. Now, so we do have a base idea for the console. Let's just say internally we're working with a first-gen PS5 or even a late-gen PS4 Pro, with all the bells and whistles. Streaming, Blu-ray, 4K player, all the works. Like I said, we will get into a little more of that later. And for the sake of argument, and almost out of necessity, Sega has repaired all of their third-party relations. As much as I and many other fans would love a new NFL 2K game, that's just not where we are in gaming. Sega gets all the new EA and 2K releases, COD releases, and in a way, this is what's going to set them apart. In addition to having all the things we're going to get into, this is basically going to be the best of both worlds. You're looking for the best AAA experiences? It's gonna be there. You're looking for an in-depth single-player game? It's gonna be there. You want family-friendly adventures or fun games with your friends? They will be there. If you want a blast from the past with retro releases, they are gonna be there. And in fact, that's where we're going to start. As so many fans and creators have talked about, this basically has to be almost a legacy backlog console in a way. In this case, take a page out of Nintendo's book. With the Switch, they basically have been getting the last generation to all who couldn't experience it. However, it's really only the best of the best. So let's start there. In this case, I feel you need to push the Saturn and the Dreamcast very, very much in the first year, and obviously in the lead up to the release. These are the consoles that really didn't have a chance to shine, especially the Dreamcast, because so many of these games were just so ahead of their time. Here's exactly what I had in mind. There would be two ways these games would get released: the Rewind way and the Ages way. Oh, and unless I say otherwise, all of these games would be announced and released during the build-up for the console and within the first year. Sega's Rewind editions would be the digital-only releases of, at least at the start, 5 to 10 of the best games per console. So in this case, 5 for the Master System, CD, 32X, and Game Gear, and then 10 for the Dreamcast, Saturn, and Genesis. For the Rewind edition, these are basically pushing to be the most faithful port of the game with a fresh coat of paint. The best way I can describe it is what Nintendo did with Mario 64 for the 35th anniversary, but better. For both of these editions, we'll be using Jet Set Radio as an example. Basically, these would just take the original ROMs and upscale them to 1080p, fix bugs and glitches, optimize it for modern controls, and give it basic emulation features like options to add scan lines, save states, etc. And notice how I didn't mention widescreen. These are truly just taking the original game and making it playable for modern audiences. Original aspect ratio and all. The thing with these though is none of them would be over 3,200 yen or 1999 pounds and USD. Plus there always are going to be sales, and all of these games are going to be available at launch. Now for my physical media fans, I know that this hurts a bit, but overall I don't think that these all need an individual release. However, I would plan to release a collection called the Sega Rewind Insert Console Edition. These would be the 10 games mentioned all on one disc for 6,300 yen or $39.99, really taking inspiration from the Sonic collections. They would add general stuff too. Say for the Dreamcast edition, there would be interviews, movies for all of the games, and remixes for the most popular tracks, and maybe even a bonus game. Now, the Ages edition is a whole nother story. This would be the objective best way to play these games. 4K upscale with widescreen, bug fixes, controls, but now add more. If we're using something like Jet Set Radio, it would remix, remake, and remaster all the tracks and add 10 more. 3 new areas with more missions, more characters, more customization options, and it would be the complete version. What I mean by that is, sometimes games will leave out or cut something that was in the Japan version but won't be in the North American release, or something that's in the North American release won't be in the PAL version. All of that would be over, as all content from all games would be in this version so everyone gets the same game. Even the case would contain a thank you letter from Sega and a mini synopsis about the game, and on the back of this letter would be a free download code for the Rewind version of this game, with 4 box arts. There would be the Ages edition cover, which would take inspo from all of the box arts, but included would be the box art from all 3 regions as reversible covers, and all of this would be no more than 8,000 yen or $49.99. And we really would get those prices when we get to the Dreamcast games. Now, the main catch with this would be only 3 would be releasing for each major console except the Master System. 3 Genesis, Saturn, and Dreamcast games would all come first. Long story short, the Rewind edition is the most faithful port of the original game with very little done to improve it. Just an upscale and general quality of life improvements, plus digital only. The Ages edition would be the updated, complete, objective best way to play these games, plus more. If I had to pick, I would say Altered Beast, Phantasy Star, and Gunstar Heroes for the Genesis, Nights into Dreams, Panzer Dragoon, and Guardian Heroes for the Saturn, and the Dreamcast will actually get 4, with Jet Set Radio, Skies of Arcadia, Crazy Taxi, and 1 more. Now let's go ahead and move into all the other software. So I actually really like Marks on Media's idea about bringing some games from Capcom and Bandai Namco and just making them exclusives.
Cool. So, like, if you made these high budget versions of these games, I think that would generate a lot of buzz. And then on top of that, you need to lock down some console exclusives from other companies like Capcom and Konami. Sort of like a proof of concept that yes, there's major support coming in from these big companies.
And I do have a few for this, and I'm actually going to add Konami to the mix. For them, I'm actually going to say a brand new 3D Contra game. Capcom, I'm going to say re-release SNK vs. Capcom and make a new one, plus a new DMC. And for Bandai Namco, it should be a brand new 3D Space Combat Galaxian game and the Soul Calibur series. Yes, that includes Soul Calibur 7. Now, this is one time I'm going to admit my bias is going to come in because I love the Soul Calibur series. 3 is actually one of my favorite games of all time, and I think it's actually better than 2, but we'll get into that hot take later. But this still is going back to Sega's roots because the Dreamcast actually saw the first release of the series at home, and many say this is where it got its fans and pulled to release Soul Calibur 2, which is considered the best game in the series and one of the best arena fighters of all time. Speaking of which, I think that not long after launch, an HD remaster bundle of 1, 2, and 3 should release to build the hype for 7, giving fans a chance to see the best of the best from the series. Speaking of which, to call back on Mark's video, he actually mentions that yes, in a way this whole thing is possible, but none of these games can be B-grade. And I completely agree with this as well. These need to be amazing and top tier ports, remasters, and new games, especially if you're talking about revisiting an old series, and most importantly, to keep the console alive. And also show that within 1 year, you didn't come back for just a generation. You came to stay. Lastly, on the third party stuff, the only thing I really could think of is maybe some sort of agreement for cheaper games with 2K, mainly because Sega actually used to own 2K for the longest time, and maybe as a nod to them, they could make it to where it's cheapest to buy it on the Cosmos. Or you get some sort of perk. I haven't really played these in a long time, so I didn't really think it out too much. But now, Sega's properties. I've decided to go with 25 properties for the year and 10 available on launch day, a mix of old, new, remasters, and remakes. This is actually not including the Rewind games. That will actually be available on the Sega store, so technically over 50 games will be available at launch that are Sega exclusive. The 10 will consist of a new Puyo Puyo game, Super Monkey Ball, Virtua Tennis, Initial D Racing game for home consoles, Persona 6, Like a Dragon, a new Panzer Dragoon, Jet Set Radio, the Ages Edition, a new Echo the Dolphin game, and Then the other 15, we would have Altered Beast, Phantasy Star, Gunstar Heroes, Nights into Dreams, Panzer Dragoon, Guardian Heroes, Skies of Arcadia, Crazy Taxi, all getting Ages remasters. Then Virtua Fighter 6, Soul Calibur 7, a new 3D Golden Axe game, and the 3 other slots for new original properties. And okay, I can't get around it any longer. You probably have noticed by this point, but I have been avoiding a certain name this whole time. He's of course a big reason why Sega even made it this far as a company. His fans have made it through the good and many, many, many bad times. I've been avoiding him not because he's not important, but because he literally deserves his own section. All my humans, I would like to introduce the concept of System Sonic. Truly, what can I say that has not been said a billion times over? Sonic is an anthropomorphic blue hedgehog created by Yuji Naka, Naoto Oshima, and Hirokazu Yasuhara. The first game, simply named Sonic the Hedgehog, released in 1991 for the Sega Genesis to rival Nintendo's Mario, and the rest is genuinely history. Sonic went on to become one of the most recognizable fictional characters of all time, tying with Mario in 1993 for the highest earning entertainment character of the year, earning $500 million. And by 2014, the franchise has grossed over $5 billion. To kick things off, this would literally be a separate section for the Sonic system. The name coming from a solar system. Literally as appreciation to the franchise, Sonic should have his own solar system in the cosmos. This would have all the mainline Sonic games at launch as well. Now, Kuro Talks actually did do a video, and I'm pretty sure a video series, and a lot of answers were given, but I'm just going to go with this one by Julie Rocket. They said Sonic 1, CD, 2, 3, and Knuckles, Mania, Superstars, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, Heroes, Shadow, Secret Rings, Unleashed, Black Knight, Colors, Sonic and Shadow Generations, Lost World, Forces, Frontiers, and Dream Team. In this case, I'm not here to open up a whole discussion. That's actually why I recommended the video. But point being, all of these would be available at launch, and the only versions I feel should get a Sega Rewind release are Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, mainly because these are the best Sonic games that not everybody got to play. And of course, the last 2 slots for release day and the Sega exclusive in year 1 will be taken by Sonic. In my opinion, you have 3 options. Either release a truly perfect boost game, story, animations, and all, with 80% boost gameplay and the longest in the gameplay type. Truly sit back and make a Sonic Adventure 3, or make a true, lengthy, and replayable open-world Sonic game. Once again, I am not going to get into what makes a perfect Sonic game. So let's just say whatever your headcanon of a perfect Sonic game is for all of these releases, that's what it would have to be. Because it would have to be a candidate for at least a top 5 Sonic game of all time. The boost game, I feel, would really be good for familiar sake. So many people are used to this formula basically for the last 20 years at the time of this console's release. And if you're trying to get new fans, this could be the safest option, but I feel the length and story would have to be some of the best told in any of these games. Sonic Adventure 3 would be calling on the nostalgia. Basically modernizing the Sonic Adventure story and gameplay could work, especially with the best versions of 1 and 2 being available on this console. But I think they would have to just go all out and make a true perfect 3D open world Sonic game. Once again, we're not really going to get into what this would be, but this is where you call on fans and fan developers just like Sonic Mania. There are so many fans who have made demos and short games where running around like Sonic in a 3D world feels amazing. Also, this is where I would comment on the power of the console and basically look at this as a new era of Sonic. Once again, take a page out of Nintendo's book. Push to make the game look beautiful because the actual game itself looks beautiful. You don't have to push for this super realistic gameplay, just make it look beautiful in its own way, and the console will have the power to take that and display it in 60 frames, 4K. My main point is just don't make that the selling point. Make the fact that the game is going to be great your selling point. Now, the second Sonic release in year 1 would also be the first remake of a Sega property on this console. If you didn't notice when I listed the mainline games, I didn't mention one. I feel that at some point within the first 8 months, they should remake and almost fully reimagine Sonic the Hedgehog, aka Sonic 06. Now again, release-wise, Sega has already confirmed that the fourth Sonic movie is reported to release at some point in early 2027. Of course, it would actually be a really big push for the console itself, but also a push for these two Sonic games. And it has been rumored that certain Sega executives would love to move forward with a remake of it.
Sonic 06 is widely regarded as one of the worst Sonic games ever made, one of the worst video games ever made, one of the worst pieces of media ever made. So if Sonic Team made an actually good remake, that would be the biggest comeback story, the biggest redemption arc of all time.
Bouncing once again off of what Kiro said, this would be so poetic and honestly add to the redemption arc of not only Sonic, but Sega. If you remember, Sonic 06 was supposed to be a bit of a reboot for the Sonic series, and it had so much confidence behind it that Sonic Team just renamed it the original game. So to come back as a console manufacturer with all of these things, and remaking not only one of the worst Sega-produced games, but one of the worst games of all time into a Metacritic must-play and Game of the Year nominee? I don't really think there's a bigger way that Sega could declare that they are back in this race. The last thing here is supporting new franchises, indie projects, and a backlog. In this case, we're talking about all the greatest hits from basically the last two gens, getting your indie gems like Celeste and Shovel Knight, plus things like the FNAF library of games, way to the bigger releases like GTA 5, Minecraft, etc. And I think it would be a good idea just to pick up some indie projects / AA games. Find maybe 2 or 3 that you enjoy and back them, maybe make those Sega and PC only. And maybe not in year 1, but at the console's launch, reveal a brand new Sega-only franchise. Now, we actually are in a bit of a kawaii era, so maybe a 2D platformer with characters that just make you go, aww. Lastly, some type of heavy story-driven action game. The Last of Us, RE4 Remake, God of War, Uncharted, something that would release early in the console's life, just maybe not year 1, that is just a game with an amazing story and action. And yeah, I think that covers all of my opinions on what I think the software should be. Now, lastly, let's get into hardware releases and how you would actually see a fresh Sega console out of the box.
Be right back, we just need to buff the scratches out of our old discs.
Take a microfiber towel and add a little bit of white toothpaste. The CD has huge gashes or cracks, this isn't going to fix them, but for fine scratches, this is a cheap and effective method.
We'll be right back with this episode of Heart Talks Games. Grew up doing the spirit bomb? Naruto running in school? Or sending people to the Shadow Realm? Yeah, so did this guy.
This is the best version. Absolute pioneer. You know what? Just read the manga.
Heart Talks Anime, only on Pilaf Entertainment.
Pilaf.
Sometimes we bite off a little more than we can chew. Trust me, happens to the best of us. But we got you covered. After every major episode, a Pilaf Bite is coming your way. Shorter, faster, all the flavor. Pilaf Bites, only on Pilaf Entertainment.
Pilaf.
As we talked about before, the base Sega Cosmos would be shipping for about 48,000 yen, 299 pounds in USD. The console would have the power of a base level PS5, and I really go with this because you're not going to need the latest and greatest tech in this way. This also gives you a range to give both companies, in this scenario, a run for their money. This, in a way, is also what's going to keep it cheaper, plus, in my opinion, this is where we aren't in the 90s anymore. We're not at the point anymore where we're seeing these big technological advancements. I feel that if you had something around that power by that time, it wouldn't really be the end of the world. Now, the actual console that was done by Stardragonmodles was on YouTube earlier this year, but now it's nowhere to be found. I wonder why. But my perfect console is really if you would take the sleek simpleness of the PS3 Slim, the retro vibes of the Genesis 2 with the Sega CD, the simple, quirky, late 90s aesthetic of the Dreamcast, and kind of the simple, timeless design of the Saturn. You kind of have what I imagine here. If I really had to pick one though, I would say they need to take a lot of inspiration from the Saturn, and I think that they actually should have a pop-open disc tray. That might just be my love for retro games showing, but I think that it would be a great callback to older consoles and different in its own way. And to be fair, a big amount of the fan base that is going to be buying this console, especially at launch, actually remembers having one of these. I would say, however, to keep it modern, push for a more minimalist design overall. This, in a way, is really bringing the modern aesthetic, as well as the main controller should just be something simple that puts you in the mind of something like a Switch Pro controller and maybe a DualShock 4. I think that it would need dual analog like a DualShock 4. The best thing that kind of represents this thought is this early mock-up of the Google Stadia controller. Like Robert and Wes talked about in their great video on this topic, a quirky, out-of-this-world controller really wouldn't work in today's space.
And then
Or
also,
Microsoft.
you know, gamers, since the consoles are basically the same, gamers, you know, are loyal to the brand, or they like the controller. You know, so are you a Sony controller or are you an Xbox controller? So then it's like, do you just build a similar controller? So then it's like, I mean, the Dreamcast was freaking weird with their controller.
Yeah.
But if you release that in 2023, people would go, what the hell is it?
Yeah, it would not land well.
People wouldn't like it. So
now, your base Cosmos would come with the console, all your needed wires, and a relatively minimalist but bold box, with one controller included, the options being the iconic Sega Jet Black and a white. Now, standard in all consoles is the pack-in codes for games and the physical games. You would get a letter from Sega thanking you for purchasing their new console and supporting them as a third-party developer for 25 plus years. And on the back, you would have 3 codes, 2 from Sega and 1 from Sonic Team. The 2 Sega codes would be valid for any Sega Rewind game, and the Sonic Team one being valid for any 90s era 2D Sonic game. This would be a way to show appreciation and basically ensure that everybody has something to play out of the box, no matter what. And really their true thank you for buying the console. They could even do a collab with GameStop or even their own website where if you pre-order it, you get an extra controller for free or some other perk. Now, it would get more expensive from here. Another blast from the past would be different colored consoles. At $349.99, these would release with the same perks but come out in pink, red, and see-through. Just another retro thing that I feel is a lost art and would also pull on the nostalgia strings. It would also include an extra controller based on the console you buy. The second would be the Dreamcast edition. And oh, this is where I forgot to mention all of the past console controllers would basically have to be released at launch. This would also be how Sega could still include a VMU with the Dreamcast controllers, but the console would be in almost a Dreamcast off-white, have a Dreamcast controller included, and come with the Ages remaster of Jet Set Radio and the rewind of Sonic Adventure 1, and include 3 download codes for any Sega Dreamcast rewind game. But it would be the second most expensive at $399.99. However, the top spot once again going to Sonic. At $449.99, the System Sonic Collector's Edition would release at the end of the fiscal year. Included would be 2 controllers based on Sonic and his friends with a Sonic Blue console. It would also have the launch title Sonic game and the Sonic 06 remake, plus a download code for Sonic Adventure 2. A thank you letter from Sega and Sonic Team. The Sega letter would have the same codes, but the Sonic Team one would give out codes for any 2 Boost Era Sonic games and 50% off any game with Sonic in the title. Basically, the absolute ultimate Sonic starter pack. Yeah, that's pretty much all my possible plans for this hypothetical console. There are many reasons you could say why Sega left this market, and just like most things in business, it's never just one decision, whether it be poor management, Sega of America and Sega of Japan not getting along well, abandoning add-ons too early, releasing consoles too expensive. Anyone could come up with reasons why they're gone, but I feel like truly, after all this time, the gaming market and the people are ready for something like this and want something like this. As promo for this video, I made a short mimicking the drop of the console, and on TikTok it now has over 100,000 views. Thank you so much for that, by the way. So just the concept of this is enough to get people talking. And I think it gets people more excited than Sega even really realizes. And please join the discussion. I want you to duet this, talk about it, make your own video talking about what it would really take to see this happen. There are hundreds and hundreds of reasons why they couldn't or shouldn't do this. But there are millions and millions and millions of reasons why they should at least give it another look. But my name is Hart, and humans, I'll see you later.